What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our betting and DFS preview for this week's Sony Open. Gonna go through what to expect from Waialae Country Club, and then over there on the DFS side of things, a few players that you might want to keep an eye on for some exposure for those large field tournaments, and potentially in a few cases for a few outright bets that I've gone to. So a lot to get into here. First full field event of the entire season. Let's go ahead and get it started off with a bang. Waialae Country Club is a venue that we are extremely familiar with. One of the most long-standing venues that we have in the entire season. And on top of that, there's a particular skill set that really thrives around here. So rather than looking at recent form metrics, as we kind of mentioned last week, can be a little bit outdated after the break for the winner, we mostly want to look at long-term form in the types of players that have found success around here. And if there's one thing that really sticks out from the shots gained profile is, first off, a lot of gainers on approach, and particularly from 150 yards and in. And on top of that, people filling it up with the flat stick on these Bermuda greens. So when we're looking at our key stats here, it's no surprise to see approach and putting at number 1 and 2. And in terms of my weighting, you have well over half my weighting on those two stats. So it's a week where, again, shots gained metrics, particularly recent form, I think can be a little bit misleading with the kind of layoff that we've had for the last month or so. But if you look at long-term form, you might be able to find some sleeper plays that can pop for their, in most cases, right, their first start of the entire season. A few other stats, we've got grainy Bermuda grass around the green, so you can always look at that for a little bit of a long-term fit. When it gets a little bit more difficult out there, you'll see this around the green stat come a little bit more in handy than what you've seen the last few years. Worth noting that the area is getting a ton of rain here on Monday and on Tuesday, so expect the course to maybe be a little bit softer this time around, which if that ends up being the case, maybe this around the green isn't nearly as important as with receptive greens, dartboards out there. You're not going to have many greens regulations miss. So for now, I've still got it in the model, but we'll have to see how the weather plays out by the time we get to Thursday. Driving accuracy is important. You have extremely narrow fairways out there, and a lot that dogleg from right to left. So if you're a player that has that draw shape, you tend to get a little bit of an advantage off the tee. But once again, if we get the more receptive fairways, driving accuracy is probably going to go down in importance as well. So we'll have to track that. I would say if it plays a little bit softer this time, right, there would be even more of an emphasis out there in the approach play. But on top of that, maybe more of an emphasis on distance, right? This isn't really a golf course where you hit a bunch of drivers on, but if it's going to play soft, be an absolute soupy, mess out there, you're going to see a lot more drivers hit, right? Guys like Aberg, some of the longer players on tour, might be able to hit the long stick a little bit more than most, and that could have an effect on the golf tournament as well. So for right now, right, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. I'm mostly looking at those approach stats from 150 yards in the putting, but we'll see if that tweaks, by the time we get out there on Thursday. And in terms of our players, a few outrights, a few core plays that we'll talk about right now, a lot of the same types of players I'm targeting. So up here in the 10K range, you have a lot of players that haven't played here before, and if they have played here, don't have much experience. So just to show you, right, we go over here to the event history. Sahith Theegala is actually the only one with a start over the last 5 years. So I think there'll be plenty of ownership up there, but they aren't really my favorite plays, right? Where I want to live is with the guys that have been here of late, right? That have a lot of experience, and in the cases of a Brian Harman, a Russell Henley, and even a JT Poston that we'll talk about later, check a lot of the boxes that we're looking for. So first, we'll start off with Brian Harman here at $9,900. I'm not able to get a great outright number on him. I would take the plunge at like 25 to 1, but unfortunately, I only have a 20 to 1 number available, and for right now, I'm at least holding off on that exposure. But for DFS at this kind of price tag, I think he brings plenty of upside to the table, and a few reasons why, right? Brian Harman, extremely accurate off the tee. He's one of the shorter hitters in this field as well, so anytime we can take him at an extremely short golf course, he's going to be at the top of my list at the very least. Course is only about 7,000 yards this week, and on top of that, he's one of the better Bermuda putters in this range. So he's got the putting we're looking for from 150 yards and in. You're going to be pressed to go out there and find a better player out out there in those proximity buckets. So he's got the approach play checking that. He's got the putting, obviously checked off over there as well. And if you take a look at some of the comp courses where he's had some of his top 5, top 10s, especially over the last season or two, it's at short Bermuda grass tracks. So he's pretty much an automatic play at these type of venues for me. I do think that it being a little bit softer might hurt kind of like a Brian Harman a little bit because of that added length. But even with the kind of setup we have right now, I don't think it'll be super chalky. The recent form's not the best, right? And again, I think that's a little bit misleading on a week like this. So hopefully the ownership will stay in check. So if he comes in, let's say at like sub 15% ownership, I'm going to be absolutely thrilled to get to Brian Harman. So we'll have to double check on that by the time we get to Wednesday evening, right? Of course, guys, live stream will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. But if we end up getting anything reasonable here, it's going to be one of my more leveraged plays towards the top of the board. To give you an idea of some of the event history, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible, right? It's been four straight made cuts, 4 of 5 over the last 5 years. You take a look at the recent form. He didn't play a ton during the fall, but did finish in 5th last week. T44, what was that? The RSM Classic, another course that he has a pretty solid track record at. So kind of doing his thing, right? This 0.2 shots gained per round includes a few of the playoff events where he didn't play his best golf. And if that's going to keep him in check in terms of ownership, then I'm all for it, right? If you're looking at recent form from last season, right, events from like 3-4 months ago, using that to make your decisions, that's likely a huge mistake, right? Like if you had somebody on the come up, right, they had a really solid end to the season, right? You don't want to completely discount that. But for Brian Harman, an established player, major champion last year, for goodness sakes, right? If we're going to really use those last just 12 rounds and hold it against him, then that's an edge I'll look to take advantage of. So love him there at $9,900. And our next play is pretty similar. It's a Russell Henley, a player with an excellent track record around here. On top of going out and finishing in 2nd place last year, I'd say 2 years ago, I should say, he also has a win at this golf tournament. So he's got the kind of skill set we're looking for, is very accurate off the tee, just like a Brian Harman. Also on Bermuda grass, puts a lot better than his at least historic baseline on any other surface. And if we take a look at the recent form, right, it's not crazy with Russell Henley. Did not have the best start last week, which I do think will keep his ownership somewhat in check, but 13th over there at the RSM. Again, a very similar golf course. In fact, if we take a look at our comp courses, it's not in my top 3, but it is my number 4 comp course this week. So you see we got Sedgefield on there for the Wyndham Championship, RBC Heritage, right, another short half Bermuda grass track. They have a hybrid surface out there, but it plays pretty grainy, like what you're going to have this week. Pebble Beach, and another short track with tiny greens out there. And then number 4, like I mentioned, with the RSM Classic, right? You have the Seaside and the Plantation course over there at Sea Island, and he's had a pretty damn good track record there too. So Brian Harman, another player that's played well at all of those different golf courses, and it's the same kind of feel, right? It's exposed, it's coastal golf. You have those Bermuda grass pretty much from tip to toe at all these different venues, and the types of players that succeed at those, right, are the precise guys that can hit solid wedge shots, that can keep themselves in play, and most importantly, that can fill it up with the flat stick. So Russell Henley, I do expect it to come in at least probably 20% ownership this week. In fact, Russell Henley at this kind of price tag might be your chalkiest player on the entire slate. So I do prefer him in smaller field tournaments, maybe in a single entry, that kind of build, because of the kind of steam that he's going to be getting. But even in large field GPPs, right? If you take a chalky player like Russell Henley, who might be the donkiest of chalk out here this week, you can still make it work, right? You take a pivot or two down there in the 6 and 7K range, and you're not going to have a problem taking that kind of player. So, you got to pick your spots up top. I think there's going to be at least 1-2 guys up here in the 10K range that I go ahead and mix in. But down here, the 9K range, you're saving some salary. You can start a lineup with Henley, and you're going to have all the salary you need for your other 5 spots. But even as a second man in, if you're taking somebody up here that's a little bit lower owned, you're going to start off the differentiation right there, but you add somebody down there in the 6 and 7K range, you're just fine with the product ownership. So love them there at $9,600. The track record speaks for itself. And in terms of long-term fit, is my number 7th ranked player in the field. So also fits the golf course from the stat perspective. And our last core play here, which is actually the one core play that I've put an outright bet on at this point, was JT Poston at 40-1. And on a lot of books, he's already been steamed down to 30-1. He was my first click this week. He's my number 2 course fit in terms of my modeling out there. Has won at a comp course with Sedgefield over there at the Wyndham Championship. Maybe not as accurate off the tee as like a Brian Harman or Russell Henley, but if it's going to be soft this week, right, JT Poston is the type of player that is going to be able to take advantage of that. He's one of the best players in all of the PGA Tour from 150 yards and in. On Bermuda grass, you can see he gains nearly half a stroke per round with the putter, and last week it wasn't amazing for JT Poston, right? Let's go down here to recent form, actually. Was on the wrong tab for a second. You see he finished in 5th place. It was a 44th at the RSM. This T3 was at what event? Let's see. It was the Shriners Children's Open. He's coming in with some decent form, and most importantly, from the long-term perspective, even if he wasn't in form, I was already going to get to a JT Poston, right? Long term, these are the courses that he absolutely kills. And when you take a look at the event history, it's not really what you'd expect for somebody of this course fit, but hopefully that keeps the ownership somewhat in check. So we got a T21 last year. 5 years ago, it was a top 20 finish, a couple missed cuts mixed in. So hopefully, kind of like a Brian Harman, that'll keep him in that like 15% ownership range. So I'm not expecting him to be a leverage play by any means. I also don't think he's going to be one of the higher owned players in this range. So I like that for JT Poston. Love the comp course history. Love the fact that he checks the 2 main boxes that I'm looking for. And again, if the conditions are softer this time around, I mean, he won his John Deere Classic and an extremely wet, soggy golf course. It could be that same kind of scenario this week. So if it's a birdie fest, if we're going to see even lower scoring than usual, JT Poston is the exact kind of player that I'm looking for. And take a look at the outright odds you can get, right? He was my first click at 40-1. If you can get that number, I would take it as soon as possible. It will not last. And even down to like 35-1, I'd probably still be willing to get a little bit of exposure there. Just to go ahead, plug my Patreon page here. Everything that's blacked out is, of course, posted on my Patreon. So other than these 3 players up here, there's still going to be other guys I'm getting exposure to. So if you want my projections for everyone in the field, all of my modeling to use for your own process, make sure to check that out down below. On there's an option both for DFS or for the prop betting side of things. You guys know, right, on top of the DFS content I'm posting, a lot of prop stuff, especially over the last year or so. So if you play on Prize Picks, Underdog, all those different sites out there for golf betting, there's a little something there for everyone. So check it out. Check out everyone that I'm playing this week, all the different projections, behind the scene content that I'm going out there and posting to go out there and make your process a little bit simpler and save you a little bit of time. So next up, we've got Brendan Todd, who's going to be our first value play of the week. Last week, we took Brendan, of course, went out there, had a pretty solid finish with what I think ended up a top 15 finish. Let's see, for good old Brendan. So yeah, Brendan Todd at $7,900. Actually finished T33. It's right. He had a really shitty Sunday. Could not putt for his life on Friday either, but made a ton of birdies last week. And in fact, at his kind of price tag, was far from a bad play, right? Given all the birdie production he put up. So he's gone T33, T28, T20 his last few starts. I mean, if we're looking at the recent form, which again, I'm not all that worried about on a week like this, with the break that we've had, he's been on brand, right around neutral with the approach play, loser off the tee, but doing his thing with the short game. And at this kind of golf course, kind of fits that Brian Harman mold, right? We're looking for guys that can keep it in play, that are really good from 150 yards and in. He checks that box emphatically. And we're also looking for guys that can fill it up on Bermuda. And there's pretty much no one in the world that's better than Brendan Todd on Bermuda grass. So I like that for him. I like the fact that he was able to get some play in last week, especially, rounds 1 and 3 were absolutely special for Brendan Todd. So hopefully he can, kind of channel some of those vibes here for the Sony Open. And on top of that, at comp courses, other tracks that are short positional, Mayakoba Classic comes to mind, a course that he's won at before. That's also really about the wedges and the putting. He's had some of his best performances. So it's been a while since Brendan Todd has won, but I did take the plunge on an outright bet. I took him at 50-1. So he's been steamed down to 40-1 on Hard Rock Bet. That's where I ended up playing him. But once again, if you can get that 50-1 number, I would absolutely get some exposure yourself if that's something you're looking to do. And he's just another guy that fits the golf course, right? We're looking for guys that'll keep it in play, hit some wedges, and make some putts. And that is exactly why we took Brendan Todd last week. And at this sort of golf course is an even better course fit. Next up, we've got ourselves Ben Griffin down here at $7,400. And in terms of course fit, is one of the better plays on the slate, right? He's number 5 in terms of my long-term course fit, is another guy that on Bermuda grass really raises his baseline. And on top of that, ended the year pretty solidly, right? If we take a look at his last 12 rounds before the end of the year, he gained about a stroke and a half with the putter, just outrageous stuff, losing a little off the tee, right? He's not the longest player, right? Kind of similar to all the guys that were taken this week, and pretty solid on approach, right? And he's better the closer you get him to the hole. From 150 yards and in are really where his sweet spot is when it comes to the iron play, and this is the perfect kind of golf course for him. So if we take a look at the event history last year, he did make his first start here back there in 2023, and he had a top 12 finish, right? T12, started the year with a little bit of a bang there, and that was his first time around this track. So now has a little bit of experience, has some of that course knowledge to draw off of, and now we know that this is his kind of course, right? Like RSM Classic had a really solid finish. Sedgefield, they won that golf tournament last year. Pretty much all my comp courses, Ben Griffin's gone out there and been an absolute smash play. So if you're a long-term form kind of guy, even if you're a recent form type of guy, which again, not the week to be a recent form guy, but if you were, you would absolutely love Ben Griffin this week. So I am very interested to see where his ownership comes in. I think Brendan Todd will be about average ownership for the top of the 7K range, but somebody like Ben Griffin could be really chalky this week. And I say could be and probably should be really chalky, but if he's not, he's going to be one of the best plays out there for large field GPPs. And even if he is chalky, right, kind of like Russell Henley earlier, I'm still playing him, right? I'll just differentiate at other spots. Like maybe if I'm playing a Russell Henley and I really want to take a Ben Griffin too, we have to take 3 pivot plays, but there are ways to make that work, right? And it's not rocket science to go out there and build lineups to cater towards that. So $7,400, love the metrics out there on Bermuda, and a player that I expect to get some steam this week. And the last play we'll go over here, our last value play, is arguably the best. Alexander Bjork will be an 8-9K golfer on these kind of fields at the end of the year, and I can almost guarantee you that, okay? If you aren't familiar with Bjork, these recent form metrics mean nothing. They're all from the PGA Tour, and he's a DP World Tour player, right? He's played in a few majors. He hasn't had the best starts out there in majors. I believe he has like maybe 1-2 PGA Tour starts, but again, they weren't anytime recent, and he didn't really play all that well. What you need to know about Alexander Bjork is he played 29 events last year on the DP World Tour. He made the cut in 25 of those 29 events. The 4 events that he missed the cut on, he missed 3 of them on the number. And outside of that, when he was making cuts, he finished top 10 more than anyone else on the tour last year. He was kind of like your Eric Cole grinder, right? Played a ton of events, 29 starts out there, and was extremely consistent, right? Eerily consistent, right? Eric Cole didn't have a win, but Bjork, lots of top 5 finishes, second place finishes out there in events, and isn't known as a long hitter, right? He's not really a ball striking first type of player. He's really good with the wedges from what I've seen on the DP World Tour, and a world-class putter. So we don't have the Bermuda numbers. I have no idea how he's going to fare on Bermuda. We have seen a few of these guys struggle when they get over onto that grainy surface. Almost all the greens, all the different grass types in Europe don't have that grain to it, right? If you're from South Florida, from the Southeast United States, right, you know how different putting is on our kind of surfaces compared to the rest of the world. That's my only concern, because Bjork is, let me give you a player he's better than. He's way better than Alex Noren. It's not close. He is probably up there with like your Justin Roses at this point of his career. He's probably up there with like a Cam Davis, a Siwoo Kim. So in this kind of field at the end of the year, he's going to be that kind of player. Maybe earlier in the year, you see him miss a few cuts. He might even miss the cut this week at a course that fits his game. But long-term, in terms of pedigree, this guy is a guy. You're going to see by the end of the year. He might win your Rookie of the Year. So that's my first hot take here of 2024 is Bjork is at the very least going to be in the top 3 conversation for that Rookie of the Year mark. And at this kind of price tag, he'll probably be low owned on a week like this as well. I'm going to be double, 3, maybe even 4 times the field with my leverage. So early in the year is a spot to try and take chances on some of these players that are new to tour. And Bjork is a perfect example of a guy that could be, again, a massive price discount, a massive ownership discount here early in the year, and a player that I'm looking to get over on. So we're not going to have metrics on him just for shits and gigs. I'll show you the last 36 rounds. Not great, right? You can see on the stats that we have for him, losing off the tee and losing a little bit with the putter. About neutral with the approach and around the green. You know, not really telling us a story there, but this putter will turn around. The guy makes putts in bunches. Heck, there was a round where I bet on him on the DP World Tour to go over like 5.5 birdies, and he went over it by 0.5. He got like 6 birdies on the day, but all of them were like 40-foot putts. He's just that kind of player. So I like that from Bjork. Fits the golf course, at least from the eye test over there on the DP World Tour, and is again a player that I think is way, way too cheap. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the preview for the Sony Open. Appreciate all the support here. Smash the like button on the way out of here and comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. If you guys end up getting the outright winner, you'll get a free month of my Patreon page. So make sure, go ahead, give me your thoughts down below, and best of luck with all of your exposure this week. Of course, like I mentioned before, we'll have our live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to set a reminder for that. You can go ahead, click the link down in the bio, set a reminder on YouTube so you don't miss all of that to come. Subscribe so you catch all of the content for the rest of the season, and let's go out there and have ourselves a solid start for the first full field event of the year. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun. If it gets a little bit soft, we're probably going to see a little bit of a birdie fest out there. So if you're also playing props, right, like I mentioned before, make sure to check out the Patreon page. Should be a lot of value on some unders on strokes, potentially overs on birdies for the first round of action. And for all the different exposure I'm getting to, make sure to check it out down below. Again, appreciate it, guys. Best of luck out there, and I'll catch you guys for the rest of the content throughout the week.